I have taught everything from New Testament to Reformation. I bring the same approach to reading, understanding, and trying to understand the context of a text that is religious that I would bring to a text that was just a historical source in some way, that was a chronicle, say, or something that an ancient historian had written that's not quite like our history, but that's more like our history, right? I bring that same approach to something like the New Testament texts. I'm writing a book that is, it's sort of a product of everything that I've ever done. So for most of my academic career, my all of my research has been focused on the sort of the split between Greek Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. One of the things the Christian church does is repeatedly retell its history so that the the doctrine has always been the same, but in fact the doctrine changes. So you have these splits that are two, they're partly a result of the way that Christians define their identity, which is by having right doctrine. And they're partly a result of having rewritten their history. So every time the church has a big split, it rewrites the history to make it that there's always been one church with one teaching, and those other people came in from outside somehow. One of the most interesting developments in the history of this sort of Christian splitting off from one another is that the word heresy in the ancient world just means a school of thought. Oh, I'm of the heresy of Plato. I'm of the heresy of Aristotle. I'm of the, so there's this sort of, I'm of the heresy of the Stoics. In the middle of the 2nd century, a Christian writer named Justin, who becomes known as Justin Martyr, because eventually he is a martyr, changes the meaning of that word for Christians, makes it into heresy means wrong. We can just look right there. You can pull out the writing of Justin and say, here, somebody invents it. But he also invents a history in which um, his particular kind of doctrine, his particular kind of Christianity, goes back to the apostles and therefore to Jesus directly, and therefore is clear and can be followed all the way through history, and that's orthodoxy, and anything else is heresy. Teaching at Rutgers, undergraduate or graduate, is so interesting because our students are so diverse, so religiously diverse. So if I teach a New Testament class, I might very well have Muslims and Hindus and Christians and Jews and various degrees of practice within each of those. When you have a classroom of a kind of mixed religious background, it's just amazing to watch what happens in terms of students starting to grasp that they have to talk about religion differently in a classroom context. That if often their friend or acquaintance who is not Christian is sitting next to them and they're a Bible Christian, they still have to come up with a way to talk to one another in a New Testament class. And it's easier to persuade them that there's an academic kind of discourse of religious studies way of talking about these things that isn't testifying and isn't um, sort of being hurt and offended that people are studying your texts as if they were just texts.